Hi and welcome back to Bike Speeds. So this week we're doing this Giant Fathom mountain bike. This was an epic job really, it really escalated on us this one. But with this we're going to do new chain ring, new cassette, internal routed brake cabling, new brakes, broken spokes. You can see here the brakes are very dangerous in that you actuate them and they're not releasing. So that would either be the pistons or the brake levers themselves. Very difficult to diagnose that, but we're going to deal with that by replacing them. We've got a broken spoke here on the wheel. Again, this is probably the thing that may have ended up causing this bike to have been laid up at some point. Probably had a ride, broke a spoke, then it's got damp, which has caused those brakes to fail, and it's eventually reached the end of its life, of its useful life. You can see there the chain stretched out. It's stretched out so much that all the teeth on this big ring have also worn with it. So even if we put a new chain on there, we're going to have trouble with that skipping over that big ring there. So we're going to need to replace that as well, and the chain. And actually the cassette had a lot of wear in it as well, so we had to do the cassette as well. And that's the way some of these things go. This bike had done an awful lot of mileage, it had been well used, and it just needed this big freshen up to get some more mileage out of the bike. The cassette there had little wear offs on the teeth, the main rings that the rider would have used over the time. They were all worn off and skimmed off, so we're going to sort those out. And look at this rear derailleur here, it's sort of got a thick pasty residue on it, which we're going to deal with that. We're going to change all these cables, they're internal routed down the down tube. We're going to sort all those out, clean everything up, re-grease it all. I'll talk you through all the greases and everything, and we'll get this bike back to full song. So off comes the chain set, because we're going to need to do that chain ring, and it's a good time to clean everything. It's a good time to feel the bearings, to see the wear in the bike, feel what parts we need to change and everything else. We're going to get the handlebar grips off because we need to swap these brakes out. What I do with those handlebar grips is I push something with a nice sort of blunt end down the handlebar and the brake handlebar grip, and then I squirt that with WD-40, and that just allows me just to literally slip off. And we wash all the WD-40 off, and we can then put the handlebars grips back on, and I'll show you a little trick that we do when we do that as well, to make them stick and bond nicely to the handlebars again so they can be reused. You can see here we're getting everything off, so out coming all the old cables, all the components that we're going to be replacing or dealing with. We take all those off. Now you can see here a little kink on the end there, and then that big kink on that cable. Now that's where it would sit in the shifter itself, but that kink is where that cable has been caught heavily at some point. Put that kink in there, that's really life extinct for that cable at that point. It's never going to shift nicely because that's always going to grab the outer and give you a poor shift from the day that was caught onwards. So who knows at what point in the lifespan of this bike that was, but we're going to deal with that. Initially we clean up the jockey wheels. You can see all this debris that's come off of those. You're dragging that round your chain every single pedal stroke, so the bike is going to drag. It's not going to be smooth. Again, when you're changing gear, it's not going to change smoothly because all that drag and debris on the jockey wheels. So we'll clean up the derailleur and the jockey wheels and re-lubricate all that, and it will just shift almost like new again. It will just be a different bike, be worlds apart from the last ride once this is all done. Next up, we degrease everything. We've got a 6 litre ultrasonic cleaner that has a water soluble degreaser in it, so we put all the components that we're going to clean up through the ultrasonic cleaner. Then we wash them down with warm soapy water, which is what we're now doing. So we're washing basically off the degreaser that we've used to make sure there's no residue of that left on the components, because obviously we're also going to lubricate them. This chain set I didn't actually put through the ultrasonic cleaner because of the pedals, so a little bit of degreaser on there. That's just a spray regular degreaser to clean up the parts that are still greasy on there, as you can see just around the middle there where there's a little bit of grease and debris. So a little bit of degreaser spray and a wash down, and those parts are ready. Next up, we're just using a premium grease around these jockey wheels. We're just like lubricating the roller in the center and then the covers, just to give that a little bit of lubrication, because they are spinning and they do need a little bit of help. And then we're using Loctite 222 there on the bolts that hold the derailleur together. That's a very low strength Loctite, just to run any risk of that coming undone when it's on the bike. That just alleviates that. Nice thin oil on all the pivot points, as you can see there, and then a little bit of copper slip on the thread and a little bit of genuine purpose grease on the shaft of that quick release skewer there. I like to lubricate all parts that are a moving part essentially, so the skewers themselves always need a little bit of lubricating, or they could stick inside the wheel itself. And again, here we're just rebuilding the chain set, so we've got the brand new chain ring on there, the large ring. The small ring, although it had wear, was nowhere near as worn as the big ring. It got plenty of miles left in that, so there was no need to replace that as well. And now we're just going to start dealing with this wheel. So we're going to initially take off the disc, rotor, and then take off the tyre. Now you can see here there's 3 reasons would cause this: corrosion, the spoke being too short, or a shock. And although the bike was quite corroded, none of the other nibbles were corroded, so I don't think corrosion was the issue there. I did actually put a slightly longer spoke in here because of the issue where sometimes if a spoke doesn't reach the end of the threads, it can cause that shock and snap. And I actually think that's what happened. I actually think it had a shock and had broken off the end of the nipple on this one. So we put in a new spoke, we retension it, then we begin to go round the wheel, feeling the tensions of all the spokes as we're going. We're measuring those along the way, and then eventually we draw up a graph. You can see here, this is how the wheel came in, and number 10 on the right hand side, the tensions each side of that one were high. So I actually think that spoke was probably over tightened initially, which again, when it shocked, eventually bang, it snapped. And so I got all the tensions on that wheel within 10% of each other around the entire wheel. So I'm quite happy with that wheel now when it goes out. New rim tape, just push that through where the valve goes, and now on goes the tyre. Even this tyre was actually rotating the wrong way. It was actually on the wrong way round on the bike. You'll notice on the before and afters, that little logo there by the valve is only on the front wheel on the befores, where on the afters you'll see it on the front and rear wheel, because we turned that tyre around, it was rotating the wrong way. So next up, we just clean up the free hub and just make sure everything's okay there, feeling the bearings. Again, there was a little bit of wear in these bearings, but they weren't too bad. They've still got some mileage left in them, so probably on the next service, if it's a big service, we'll be looking at more bearing work on this bike. But initially, this was all about getting this bike safe and actually rideable again. So now we just clean up the disc before we put that on the back wheel. So we sand this down with an emery cloth. This is originally 80 grit that's probably worn to around 100 grit. So you can see on this before and after what a difference. That's it as it is ready to go back on the bike, and this is it ready to be done on this side. So we'll now sand that side, clean that side, and you can see it almost makes it like a new disc by the time it goes back on the bike. None of those grooves that cause that sort of squealing sound on your brakes are there now. It's all smooth again, so that's absolutely ready to go. And then we torque those up to the specified spec. And the same with this side, we put on a new cassette here, and then we torque this up to the specified spec, so everything there on that back wheel is now ready to go on. And we also do that on the front wheel. We actually don't do the front wheel on camera, we tend to pick one or the other for the filming of the YouTube. So the front wheel's now been cleaned up, and now we're going to the frame and just detailing that down. So we're just using a detailing brush, and then this nice soft brush that we use to wash down, microfiber towels to wipe down, maybe a little bit of degreaser here and there on any parts that we won't wash down, and just dry it all off, make sure everything's nice, have a little feel around the bike as we're doing this, clean the saddle, just going through the entire bike till we're happy that everything's right there. Next up, we've got all these cables and brake hoses to change. They all run down this down tube. I mean, there's quite a lot of cables in here. There's actually brake, front derailleur, rear derailleur, and seat posts, so there's 4 cables running down there. What I do is I put all the outers in on this one first, and that then gives me my guides for my cables when I come to do them. So we're just swapping all those over now. It's a little bit of a time consuming process, this one. So if you're new to the channel, thanks for joining us tonight or today or this morning, whatever it would be, wherever you are. We're pleased you're here. Do subscribe, because we're doing these sort of videos every week. Basically, we pull out one of the bikes that comes in the shop that's in for a service, and we get this weekly video that we bring to you every week. So now we're just getting the brakes on, so now goes on the front brake, and a little bit of premium grease on the axle here just to help that go through the bearings and get its position nicely in its bottom bracket bearing there. On goes the chain set. We torque these up to specifications, and then we're putting on the derailleurs next, so on goes the front one. Again, we just do these pinch tight, we don't fully tighten them up at this stage, we just get everything right, everything aligned. In goes the back wheel. I had already noticed when we were taking this bike apart that this derailleur hanger here was actually bent, so I'm just realigning that. It wasn't actually an awful lot, but it was enough that it would really alter the shifting, so just realigned that before on goes the back derailleur. And there was also a clip missing on this derailleur cable, but obviously we were replacing that anyway, so we just put a new clip on there at the same time. And then on goes our lovely new chain. Now in goes the actual inner. These are our super slick cables. These are a tightly wound stainless steel cable. They're much smoother and softer to the touch than most derailleur, well, any other derailleur cable that I've actually handled. They're a lovely cable that we use for all our derailleur work. They just give a superior shift, way better than anything else I've used. That's what we've got here, these super slick cables. So new cables front and rear, new ends on those, and now it's just changing gear. It's a delight. I mean, when it came in, the gears were all over the place, especially with that stretched chain. That actually affects your gear shifting. The B screw needed adjusting on this one as well. That made a huge difference to the way it was changing, so we were quite pleased with those gears at that point. Next up, we deal with the brakes. So we've got these new hoses which we've already put through the down tube, and now we're just going to put a new olive and end on these. These are a double piston brake. These were actually an upgrade from what was on the bike, because the world has sort of been a little bit upside down for supply in the last year or two, and the brakes on this were no exception. I couldn't replace like for like, I had to upgrade, otherwise I would have had to wait 6 months, I think it was the time scale on that one. So as with the other side, we just sized this brake hose, fit the new olive and end, and then we put that back in. You may notice that in the UK we ride with the right hand as a front brake and the left hand as a rear brake. That's opposite side to the continent. It's actually the side that you drive on, so we're right hand drive, so that's why our right hand operates the front brake, which is a little bit unique to the UK and other countries that ride right hand drive. So we just test these brakes. They're absolutely working absolutely perfectly. We just do a couple of spin tests to make sure the calipers are lined up with the discs themselves. So we now put the handlebar grips back on, and the little trick that I said I would show you on that is that we actually use hairspray, because we spray the handlebars with hairspray and it allows them to slide on, and then as that dries it really adheres the handlebar grips back onto the bike, so that's a nice thing to do there. So finally we've got everything back together. We're now happy that everything's working. Everything was pinch tight initially so that we could adjust it, get it right, and then we gradually work through the bike now with the torque wrench, torquing up all the bolts, including things like the pinch bolts, pedals, derailleur bolts, brake bolts, all these various bolts and things we do to manufacturer specification, and then we finally just do up the parts on the frame. These were actually completely loose, as you can see. That's not faking for the video, that was how they came in. Just, you know, even check things like the accessory bolts. A little bit of air into the forks, they were just a little bit low, but I'm not surprised because this bike is quite a few years old now. So I really enjoyed this bike, and as you can see from these before and afters, what a difference we made. You know, this bike looks like a new bike. It was so rewarding to do this one. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.